Hi, I'm Sarah. I thought family meant unconditional love, a safe harbor, a place where you'd always belong. Instead, on my 30th birthday, my parents handed me a packed suitcase and told me to get out. No warning, no discussion, just a cold dismissal from the people who were supposed to love me most. You're too old to be living here rent-free, they said. I'd been paying their mortgage. I'd been keeping their lights on. I'd been drowning myself to keep them afloat. And somehow I was the burden they needed to shed. But the cruelest part wasn't the eviction, it was discovering I'd been nothing more than a financial lifeline they could discard once they thought they didn't need me anymore. And when I finally stood up for myself and cut them off, they tried to destroy me. Before we dive in, I'm curious, what time are you reading this and where are you? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear if you've ever faced something similar. Because sometimes the family that breaks you is the same one that teaches you how to become unbreakable. Part 1. The Final Dinner. I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home in Millbrook, Connecticut, the September sun already sinking behind the old maple trees that lined our street. The air had that particular New England crispness that whispered of autumn's arrival, making me pull my cardigan tighter as I grabbed the small white bakery box from the passenger seat. Inside was a simple chocolate cake. Nothing fancy, just something I'd picked up from the grocery store on my way over. Happy 30th birthday, written in blue frosting that had already started to smudge against the plastic window. As I walked up the front steps, something felt different. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting. I'd lived here my entire life, save for a brief stint in community college dorms, and I knew every creak of these floorboards, every draft that whistled through the old windows. Tonight, even the familiar felt foreign. The smell of pot roast hit me as I opened the door Mom's go-to for family dinners. But there were no birthday decorations, no cards on the hallway table where she usually displayed them. Just the steady tick of the grandfather clock and the muted sound of the evening news from the living room. "You're late," Dad called from the dining room, not bothering to look up from his plate when I entered. Richard. Never. Rick always. Richard sat at the head of the table like he always did, shoulders squared, jaw set in that particular way that meant he had something on his mind. Traffic was bad coming from work, I said quietly, setting the cake on the kitchen counter. The Davidson audit ran long. Mom Janet barely glanced up from her green beans. Well, dinner's getting cold. I hung my purse on the back of my usual chair and sat down, the familiar squeak of the old wood somehow ominous tonight. They'd already started eating. No waiting for the birthday girl. No acknowledgement of the day at all. We ate in silence for several minutes, just the scrape of silverware against Mom's good china, the ones she only brought out for occasions. I pushed a piece of overcooked carrot around my plate, my appetite evaporating with each passing second of this oppressive quiet. I kept waiting. For someone to mention my birthday. For the tension to break. For this to be some elaborate setup for a surprise. But I knew my parents better than that. Richard and Janet Morrison didn't do surprises. They did cold, calculated decisions presented as unchangeable facts. It was Richard who finally spoke, setting down his fork with deliberate precision. "Sarah, your mother and I have been talking." My stomach clenched. Nothing good ever followed those words. "You're 30 years old now." He said it like an accusation, like I'd committed some crime by having the audacity to age. "It's time you found your own place." The words hung in the air between us, incomprehensible. I looked to Mom, waiting for her to soften the blow, to explain that he didn't mean it the way it sounded. But she kept her eyes fixed on her plate, lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't understand," I managed, though my throat felt like it was closing. "I pay rent. I pay the electric bill, the internet, half the mortgage. Contributing to household expenses doesn't entitle you to live here forever." Richard interrupted, his tone as sharp and final as a judge's gavel. "We've been more than patient. Most people your age have been on their own for years." Most people my age haven't been supporting their parents since they were 22. I shot back before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's knuckles went white around her fork. Richard's face flushed that particular shade of red that preceded his worst tirades. Supporting us? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call it? Paying your fair share while living under our roof, eating our food? I buy the groceries, I said quietly. I've been buying them for 8 years. Enough. He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. This discussion is over. You have 2 weeks to find alternative arrangements. 2 weeks. They were giving me 2 weeks to dismantle the life I'd built around keeping this family afloat. 2 weeks to find an apartment in Connecticut's brutal rental market. 2 weeks to accept that the parents I'd sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient tenant. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky. It's my birthday, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Yes, Richard said, already turning his attention back to his pot roast. And it's time you grew up. I walked to the kitchen in a daze, staring at the cake I'd bought myself. The cheap grocery store cake with its smudged frosting and missing A in birthday. The cashier had apologized, but I'd said it didn't matter. Because it didn't. Because apparently nothing I did mattered. Without really thinking about it, I picked up the box and dropped it in the trash. The soft thud it made against the bag seemed to echo through the kitchen. Then I walked upstairs to my room. My room for only 2 more weeks, and closed the door. I sat on my bed, the same twin bed I'd had since I was 12, and looked around at the life I was being expelled from. The walls still held thumbtack holes from old posters. My desk was cluttered with files from work bills I managed for the household, the careful budgets I maintained to keep us above water. All of it suddenly felt like evidence of my own foolishness. My phone buzzed. A text from my friend Emma. Happy birthday. Hope your family dinner is amazing. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I opened my laptop and began searching for apartments, the blue glow of the screen, the only light in my rapidly darkening room. Outside my window, I could hear my parents moving around downstairs, the ordinary sounds of dishes being washed, the TV being turned to their evening programs. Life going on as if they hadn't just ripped mine apart. But as I scrolled through listing after listing, something cold and hard began to crystallize in my chest. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they had no idea what they were about to lose. Part 2. The Disconnection. I sat in the darkness of my room laptop screen, casting harsh shadows across the walls I'd stared at for 30 years. The house had settled into its nighttime routine, the dishwasher humming downstairs, the creak of Dad's recliner as he settled in for his evening news, Mom's footsteps padding to the kitchen for her nightly glass of white wine. Everything so normal, so routine, as if they hadn't just served me an eviction notice with my birthday dinner. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I pulled up our online banking. Joint accounts, shared passwords, everything intertwined because that's what families do. Mom had always said. We trust each other. Trust. The word tasted bitter now. I navigated to the utility companies first. Connecticut Light and Power account holder Sarah Morrison. I'd taken over the electric bill when Dad forgot to pay it 3 winters ago, and we'd spent 2 days without heat. My salary had been smaller then, fresh out of college, but I'd made it work. I always made it work. Click. Cancel automatic payment. Click. Remove payment method. Click. Schedule service disconnection for September 30th, exactly 2 weeks from today. The gas bill was next. Then the water. Then the internet they used to stream their shows every night. One by one, I methodically removed myself from every service that kept this house running. My name, my credit cards, my checking account, all of it extracted with surgical precision. The house felt different already, though nothing had actually changed yet. It was the knowledge that made the air feel thinner, made the walls seem less solid. In 2 weeks, when I walked out that door, the comfortable life my parents had built on my back would crumble. I pulled up the mortgage payment portal next. I'd been paying exactly half $100 a month since I'd gotten my promotion 3 years ago. Before that, I'd contributed what I could, sometimes going without lunch, to make sure the payment cleared. The bank account it drew from was joint, something Mom had insisted on for emergencies. Transfer scheduled $13,200 from joint checking to personal savings. It was everything I'd contributed to the mortgage this year, sitting there like a safety net they'd forced me to weave. Money that could have gone to my own place, my own life, my own future. Instead, it had gone to keeping a roof over the heads of people who were now kicking me out from under it. My phone buzzed. Tyler, my cousin. "Hey, birthday girl. How was dinner with the fam?" I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and started apartment hunting in earnest. Studio apartments in Millbrook started at $1,800 a month. I could afford it. God knew I'd been affording much more than that, but the irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been paying to live in this house while simultaneously preventing my parents from losing it. A memory surfaced last Christmas, Mom crying at the kitchen table over a pile of bills. "I don't know how we'll manage," she'd said, and I'd quietly taken the stack from her, paid them all online while she made tea. She'd hugged me afterward, called me their blessing. Some blessing. By 2 a.m., I'd systematically removed myself from every financial entanglement. Phone plan, they were on their own. Streaming services, goodbye. Netflix, Hulu, and HBO Max. Even the grocery delivery service I'd set up when Mom's arthritis made shopping difficult. All of it gone with a few clicks. I stared at the list I'd made. Electric, $180 a month; gas, $95 a month; water, $45 a month; internet, $85 a month; bond, mortgage contribution, $1, $100 a month; groceries, $500 a month; miscellaneous bills, $200 a month; over $200 a month. That's what I'd been worth to them. That's what they were about to lose. The house creaked around me, settling into the cool September night. Somewhere in the walls, the old heating system clicked on a system I'd paid to repair last spring when it died during an unexpected cold snap. Everything in this house bore my fingerprints, my sweat, my sacrifice. I closed the laptop and lay back on my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. There was a water stain in the corner from an old leak. Another repair I'd funded. In the morning, I'd start packing. I'd smile at breakfast, go to work, come home, and pack some more. I'd play the grateful daughter for 2 more weeks, while they congratulated themselves on their tough love. They had no idea what was coming, how the lights would flicker and die, how the heat would stop flowing, how the carefully maintained fiction of their middle-class stability would evaporate the moment I walked out the door. I thought I'd feel guilty. Instead, I felt nothing at all. Just a cold, clear certainty that if I wasn't family enough to deserve a home here, then they weren't family enough to deserve my sacrifice. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 3 a.m., 11 hours since they'd blown up my life over pot roast and canned green beans. 11 hours since I'd become a stranger in the only home I'd ever known. But I wasn't the only one who'd lost something tonight. They just didn't know it yet. The aftermath. The first 3 days passed in a blur of cardboard boxes and carefully maintained facades. I went to work, came home, packed quietly in my room. At dinner, we all pretended nothing had changed. Richard commented on the news. Janet complained about her book club. I nodded and smiled and said nothing about the apartment applications I'd submitted or the boxes accumulating in my closet. It was Thursday morning when the first crack appeared. I was already at work when my phone lit up with texts. 7 from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them sit there unanswered while I finished preparing for the morning meeting. It wasn't until lunch that I finally looked. "Mom. Sarah, the internet isn't working. Can you call the company?" "Mom. The cable is out too. This is ridiculous." "Mom. Are you getting my messages?" "Dad. Your mother is hysterical. Fix the internet before I get home. I deleted them all and went back to my salad. By evening, when I pulled into the driveway, I could see them through the window. Mom on the phone, gesturing frantically, Dad pacing behind her. The house felt different as I walked in. Smaller, dimmer. The usual glow of the TV was absent, leaving only the harsh overhead lights. Finally, Dad barked the moment I entered. The internet and cable have been out all day. Your mother's been on hold for hours. Oh, I said mildly, hanging up my coat. That's frustrating. Well, he stood there, arms crossed, clearly expecting me to leap into action. Aren't you going to handle it? Why would I handle it? I asked, matching his tone. I'm moving out in 11 days. Seems like something the homeowners should sort out. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom lowered the phone slowly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The account. She started, then stopped. Understanding dawned across her face like a slow-motion car crash. It's in your name. I corrected. I canceled it. Didn't want to stick you with a bill after I left. That would be irresponsible. Richard's face went through several shades of red before landing on purple. You canceled. Without telling us. You gave me 2 weeks' notice of eviction. I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm simply getting my affairs in order, like a responsible adult. I walked past them and up to my room, leaving them sputtering in the kitchen. Through the thin walls, I could hear them arguing, Mom's voice shrill, Dad's booming. The word overreacting featured prominently, followed by ungrateful and dramatic. But I noticed neither of them offered to set up new service. The next morning, Friday, I was awakened by pounding on my door. Sarah. Mom's voice panicked. The power's out. I glanced at my phone. September 20th. The disconnection wasn't scheduled for another 10 days, but I'd forgotten about the past due notice that had been buried in the pile of bills I'd been managing. Without my automatic payment, I opened the door to find her in her bathrobe, hair disheveled, clutching her cell phone like a lifeline. The power's been shut off, she said, as if I hadn't heard her the first time. Everything in the fridge is going to spoil. Your father's CPAP machine won't work. You have to fix this. I don't have to do anything, I said quietly. I'm a tenant who's been asked to leave. Utilities are the landlord's responsibility. Landlord. Her voice cracked. Sarah, we're your parents. Are you? I asked. Because last I checked, parents don't evict their children. Landlords do. I closed the door on her shocked face and started getting ready for work. I'd shower at the gym near my office. I'd grab breakfast on the way. I'd managed without them before I moved back home. I could manage for 10 more days. But they'd never managed without me. By the time I got home that evening, the house was dark, except for the flickering light of candles. Richard's car was gone, probably seeking refuge at his brother's house where the lights still worked, and the internet still flowed. Mom sat alone at the kitchen table, illuminated by a camping lantern I recognized from the garage. She looked up when I entered, and for the first time in years, she looked her age. Maybe older. The power company wants $1,800 to restore service, she said quietly. The past due amount plus reconnection fees, plus a deposit. Your father. We don't have it. Not until his pension check comes next week. I said nothing, just collected some more clothes from my room and headed back out. Where are you going? She called after me. Emma's, I said without turning around. She has power, and internet, and parents who want her around. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of the dark house, camping lantern in hand. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. My phone buzzed constantly as I drove, messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, the family grapevine working overtime. But I didn't read them. I'd been cut off, told I was too old to need family. They were about to learn what being cut off really meant. Part 4. The Smear Campaign. By Saturday morning, Richard had taken to Facebook like a wounded general rallying his troops. I saw the post while having coffee at Emma's kitchen table, her cat purring in my lap as I scrolled through my phone. After 30 years of providing a roof over our daughter's head, giving her every opportunity, sacrificing our retirement years for her comfort, she has chosen to abandon her family in our time of need. Some children grow up to be grateful. Others become selfish. Prayers appreciated as Janet and I navigate this difficult time. 87 reactions, 42 comments. In a small town like Millbrook that was practically front-page news. Emma read over my shoulder, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. "Holy shit, Sarah. He's really going scorched earth." The comments were a mix of sympathy and subtle interrogation. My high school English teacher asking if everything was all right. The neighbors wondering why they'd seen me loading boxes into my car. Church friends offering prayers and casseroles, as if my parents were grieving a death, rather than orchestrating a character assassination. "You should defend yourself," Emma said, but I shook my head. "Let them talk," I said, scratching behind the cat's ears. "The truth has a way of coming out." But Richard wasn't done. Over the next 3 days, the posts escalated. Photos of my empty room with captions about empty nest heartbreak. Stories about how they'd sacrificed everything for their ungrateful daughter. He even posted a picture of a disconnection notice from the electric company, conveniently cropping out the part that showed the account holder's name, mine. My phone became unbearable. Calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all with the same disappointed tone. "Your Aunt Helen," leaving voicemails about family duty. "Cousin Michael," texting Bible verses about honoring thy father and mother. Even my grandmother, sweet Nana, who lived in Florida, called to ask why I was putting your poor parents through this. I wanted to scream the truth. That they'd kicked me out. That I'd been paying their bills since college. That their sacrifices had been bankrolled by my paychecks. But I held my tongue and saved my receipts literally. Every bank statement, every utility bill, every canceled check. 8 years of evidence, all neatly organized in a folder marked Truth. The breaking point came Tuesday night. I'd been staying with Emma but needed to grab some winter clothes from the house. I timed it for when I knew they'd be at their weekly dinner with Dad's brother, or so I thought. The house was dark when I arrived, but Mom's car was in the driveway. I let myself in with my key, moving quietly through the familiar darkness. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard her voice, low and urgent, coming from the kitchen. "Need to sell it before she realizes. Chuck Matthews at the bank said we could get at least $40,000 in equity." My blood ran cold. I crept back down, staying in the shadows of the hallway. "She's been paying half the mortgage for 3 years. A man's voice responded, Uncle Pete, Dad's brother. "Legally, she might have a claim." "She's not on the deed," Mom interrupted. "We made sure of that, and she's too naive to know any better. Always has been. So eager to help, never asking questions." Still, Uncle Pete sounded uncomfortable. "Feels wrong, Janet. The kid's been keeping you afloat." "The kid is 30 years old," Mom snapped, "and she made her choice when she canceled everything out of spite. If she wants to act like a vindictive little brat, she can face the consequences." I backed away slowly, my heart hammering. They weren't just evicting me. They were planning to sell the house I'd been paying for, and keep all the profits. The house that would have been foreclosed on 2 years ago if I hadn't drained my savings to catch up their missed payments. I recorded the rest on my phone, their casual discussion of using my financial contributions while denying me any claim to them. Uncle Pete's weak protests. Mom's justifications. Their plan to list the house as soon as I was gone, to downsize to a condo in Florida with their equity. When I finally made it to my room, I didn't bother with clothes. Instead, I grabbed the one thing that mattered, a small fireproof box from my closet containing every financial document from the past 8 years. Then I left, making sure to slam the door on my way out. They wanted to paint me as the villain, fine. But every good villain knows the importance of documentation. That night, back at Emma's, I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a Facebook post that was their battlefield. Instead, I drafted a careful email to a family law attorney I'd found online. Subject line: Tenants' rights and mortgage contribution claims. They'd fired the first shot with their public smear campaign, but I had 8 years of ammunition and I was done playing defense. Part 5: The Truth Emerges. I didn't rush to respond. While my parents continued their social media crusade, I spent the rest of the week quietly building my case. The lawyer I'd contacted, Patricia Chen, had been intrigued enough by my initial email to schedule a consultation. But before that meeting, I had one more card to play. Saturday morning. Exactly 2 weeks since the birthday dinner that changed everything. I sat in my car outside the Millbrook Community Center watching families stream in for the annual Fall Festival. The same festival where for the past 5 years I'd volunteered at the library's book sale booth, where my parents would show up for an hour, take photos for Facebook, then leave me to manage the actual work. Today, they were inside playing the victims, no doubt. I could already imagine Richard holding court near the apple cider stand, Janet dabbing at her eyes, while church ladies patted her shoulder. I walked in 20 minutes after it started, folder tucked under my arm. The buzz of conversation dimmed slightly as I passed. Small-town gossip travels fast, but I kept my head high and my pace steady. I found them exactly where I expected, near the bake sale table, surrounded by sympathetic faces. Mrs. Henderson from next door. The Pattersons from church. Even my old Girl Scout troop leader, Mrs. Yang, was there, looking concerned. "Just can't understand what we did wrong," Mom was saying, her voice carrying that perfect note of wounded confusion. "We gave her everything." "Did you?" I asked quietly. The circle parted like I'd thrown a stone into still water. Mom's face went white, then red. Dad's jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. "Sarah," Mrs. Henderson started, her voice gentle but reproachful. "Your parents are going through a difficult... They're going through a difficult time because they evicted me 2 weeks ago and just discovered I'd been paying most of their bills." I interrupted, my voice carrying further than I'd intended. Other festival goers were stopping now, pretending to browse nearby booths, while obviously listening. "That's a lie," Richard snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" I opened my folder, pulling out the first document. Electric bill, September 2016 through September 2024. Account holder Sarah Morrison. Average monthly payment $180. I set it on the bake sale table. Water bill. Account holder Sarah Morrison. Another paper joined the first. Internet, cable, gas. All in my name. All paid by me. The crowd was growing now. I saw Tyler pushing through, his eyes wide. Emma appeared at my elbow, a silent support. "Those are fake," Mom stammered, but her voice was weak. "Bank statements." I continued, laying out paper after paper. "Showing my bi-weekly mortgage payments, $1, $100 a month for 3 years. Before that, whatever I could manage while you two were between jobs or waiting for the right opportunity." Someone in the crowd gasped. I heard whispers starting. "She paid their mortgage. For 3 years. They kicked out their own daughter. And here." I pulled out my phone. "Is a recording from Tuesday night, Mom. You and Uncle Pete discussing how to sell the house and keep all the equity. The house I've been paying for. The house you made sure my name wasn't on." I played it, the volume high enough for everyone to hear. Mom's voice, clear and calculating, talking about my naivety. About taking the equity I'd helped build. About how I was too eager to help, never asking questions. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, "Janet, is this true?" It was Pastor Williams, his usually kind face creased with concern. Mom looked at him, mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. "She's twisting everything." Richard tried his politician's smile, desperately trying to form. "You know how children can be." "I'm 30 years old," I said firmly. "Old enough to be kicked out according to you. Old enough to have been supporting this family since I was 22. Old enough to be tired of being used. Sarah. Mrs. Yang stepped forward, her lined face soft with something between pity and understanding. Honey, why didn't you say anything sooner? Because I thought family meant something, I admitted and hated how my voice cracked. Because every time I tried to save money for my own place, there was another crisis, another bill, another emergency that only I could solve. And I did it because that's what family does, right? We help each other. I looked directly at my parents then. Except it was never mutual. It was just me pouring everything I had into a house that was never really mine, into people who saw me as an ATM, not a daughter. That's enough, Richard growled, grabbing Mom's arm. We're leaving. But the crowd didn't part for them this time. They had to push through, heads down, while whispers followed in their wake. Someone touched my shoulder, Mrs. Patterson, who'd been so sympathetic to them moments before. I remember now, she said quietly. You shoveling their driveway at 6 in the morning before work. Them yelling from the window to do it faster. You couldn't have been more than 23. Others chimed in with their own memories. Me mowing the lawn in 100-degree heat while Richard watched TV. Me at the grocery store, calculator outstretching every dollar. Me missing the young professionals mixer because Mom needed me to drive her somewhere, only to find out later she'd gone shopping with friends. The dam had broken. 8 years of willful blindness, of not wanting to interfere, of small-town politeness, all of it crumbled in the face of documented truth. Tyler approached as the crowd began to disperse, his face grim. I knew things were bad, he said quietly. But Sarah, this is financial abuse. I know, I said, gathering my papers back into the folder. I have a lawyer. The festival continued around us, but I could feel the shift in the air. Conversations hummed with new information. Phones came out, probably sharing the news with those who weren't there. By tomorrow, everyone in Millbrook would know the truth. As Emma and I walked back to her car, my phone buzzed with messages. Not from flying monkeys this time, but from people who'd witnessed the confrontation. Offers of support. Apologies for believing the worst. Even job leads from folks who knew I'd need to find my own place soon. But the text that mattered most came from an unknown number. This is Grace Chen from Patterson Legal. My mom was at the festival today. She says you need a real estate attorney. I specialize in property disputes and tenant rights. Call me. First consultation is free, and I think you have a case. The truth was out. Now it was time to fight for what was mine. Part 6. The Legal Battle. The law office of Patterson Legal occupied the second floor of a restored Victorian on Millbrook's Main Street. I climbed the narrow stairs on a gray Thursday morning, my folder of evidence feeling heavier with each step. Not from the weight of paper, but from the weight of what it represented: 8 years of financial servitude disguised as familial duty. Grace Chen greeted me at the door, younger than I'd expected, but with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her office was all exposed brick and modern furniture, a blend of historical charm and contemporary efficiency that somehow felt reassuring. Coffee, she offered, gesturing to a leather chair across from her desk. Please, I said, grateful for something to do with my hands. As she poured, I spread my documents across her desk. Bank statements, utility bills, mortgage payments, even text messages where my parents acknowledged my contributions, the recording from that night at the house. Everything laid out like evidence at a crime scene. Grace listened without interrupting as I told the whole story: the birthday eviction, the systematic financial disentanglement, the smear campaign, the festival confrontation. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. In Connecticut, she said slowly, there's something called a constructive trust. When someone contributes significantly to a property with the expectation of benefit, courts can recognize their interest even without their name on the deed. So, I might have a claim. You might have several claims, she corrected. Unjust enrichment, breach of implied contract, potentially even equity partnership given the percentage of mortgage you've paid. She pulled out a legal pad, began making notes. The fact that they discussed selling and keeping your contributions, that's conspiracy to commit fraud. My phone buzzed. Another Facebook notification. I'd been avoiding social media since the festival, but Grace noticed my grimace. "May I?" she asked, and I handed her my phone. Richard had posted again, this time with a photo of a legal document, a restraining order request claiming I'd harassed them at a public event. "Interesting," Grace murmured. "They've retained Howard Finch. Is that bad?" "Howard's old school, aggressive, expensive." She smiled. "Also sloppy when he's emotional, and representing family makes everyone emotional." 2 days later, I was served with papers at Emma's house, not just the restraining order request, but a civil suit. My parents were suing me for malicious destruction of household harmony and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They wanted damages from the unemployed daughter they'd evicted. "This is insane," Emma said, reading over my shoulder. "This is desperation," Grace corrected when I called her. "File a countersuit, now." So I did. For fraud, for unjust enrichment. For the fair market value of 8 years of labor, every lawn mowed, every errand run, every hour spent managing their lives, while they collected the credit. Grace helped me calculate it all down to the penny. The hearing for the restraining order came first. Millbrook's small courthouse was packed. Apparently, this had become the town's favorite drama. I sat with Grace while my parents huddled with Howard Finch, a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a 1980s law firm commercial. Judge Martinez, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed the documents with obvious irritation. "Mr. Finch," she said dryly, "your clients claim harassment at a public event. Do you have witnesses?" "Dozens," Howard boomed. "The entire festival saw your client presenting financial documents." The judge interrupted, speaking calmly about her housing situation, because that's what the 7 witness affidavits I have here describe. She turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, did you or did you not evict your daughter on her birthday?" Richard's face went red. "That's not relevant to—" "I'll decide what's relevant. Answer the question." "We asked her to find her own place," Mom said weakly. "She's 30. "And did she or did she not pay your utilities and contribute to your mortgage?" Silence. "I have bank records that say she did," the judge continued. "Restraining order denied. And if I see another frivolous filing from your clients, Mr. Finch will be discussing sanctions." But the real fireworks came 3 weeks later at the civil suit hearing. Grace had done her homework. She'd found records going back a decade. Every utility account I'd opened in my name to build credit, but really to keep the lights on. Every missed mortgage payment that coincided with my savings account being drained. Even emails where Mom explicitly asked me not to tell anyone about our arrangement because people wouldn't understand. "Your Honor," Grace argued, "this isn't just about money. This is about a pattern of financial exploitation dressed up as family obligation. My client didn't just pay bills, she sacrificed her own future to subsidize her parents' lifestyle, with the explicit understanding that she was contributing to her home." Howard tried to paint me as vindictive as an ungrateful child throwing a tantrum, but the evidence was overwhelming. And then, Grace played her ace. "I'd like to submit Exhibit 47, she said calmly. "A real estate listing posted yesterday for the Morrison family home." The courtroom stirred. I turned to see my parents shrinking in their seats. Despite claiming financial hardship, Grace continued, "The Morrisons listed their house for sale at $450,000, the same house my client paid $39,600 toward over 3 years, not including utilities and maintenance costs. They intended to profit from her investment while leaving her homeless." "That's our house." Richard exploded, jumping to his feet. Is it? Grace asked coolly. Because I have here a decade of evidence suggesting it's only your house because my client kept it from foreclosure. Twice. The judge's decision came 2 weeks later. My parents' suit was dismissed with prejudice. My countersuit was partially upheld. They were ordered to pay me $41,000 representing my mortgage contributions plus interest. They had 90 days to pay or sell the house with my portion held in escrow. But the real victory was quieter. The judge noted in careful legal language that families who exploit their children's love and sense of duty for financial gain destroy something more valuable than money. They destroy trust itself. Standing on the courthouse steps afterward, Grace shook my hand. "They'll appeal," she warned. "Let them," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. I've got nothing left to lose. And for the first time, nothing left to prove. Part 7. The New Beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of my own apartment holding a cardboard box labeled Kitchen Fragile. The space wasn't large, a one-bedroom in a converted mill building on the outskirts of Hartford, but every square foot was mine. No one could kick me out. No one could demand I leave. No one could tell me I didn't belong. The October sun slanted through tall windows illuminating hardwood floors I'd chosen myself. The exposed brick wall that had sold me on the place seemed to glow in the afternoon light. This wasn't just an apartment. It was proof that I could stand on my own feet even after they'd tried to cut them out from under me. "Last box," Emma announced, lugging it up the stairs. I still can't believe they actually paid. They hadn't wanted to. Richard had fought the judgment until the very last day of the 90-day deadline. But faced with the choice between paying me or losing the house entirely to forced sale, they'd finally written the check. Grace had made sure it cleared before I signed anything. $41,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for a security deposit, first and last month's rent, some basic furniture, and a small emergency fund. The rest went into savings, my savings in my name, only at a bank, where my parents had no accounts. I'd also gotten a promotion at work. Turns out when you're not exhausted from managing 2 households and constantly worried about making ends meet for ungrateful parents, you perform better. My boss had noticed the change immediately. "You seem different," she'd said during my review. "More focused, more confident." I was different. The Sarah who'd accepted crumbs disguised as love, who'd believed that family meant sacrificing yourself until nothing remained, she was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that real love doesn't come with a price tag. Emma helped me unpack, and we christened the apartment with Chinese takeout and cheap wine sitting on my new-to-me couch from the thrift store. My phone buzzed occasionally. I'd gotten a new number, given it only to people who'd earned the right to have it. "Have you heard from them?" Emma asked carefully. "No." I took a sip of wine. "Tyler says they sold the house, moved to a small condo in Florida. Apparently they're telling everyone they downsized by choice, and that I'm living in squalor somewhere bitter and alone." Yes." Emma gestured around the sunny apartment. "Such squalor. Much bitter." We laughed, but it was tinged with sadness. Not for the relationship I'd lost that had been gone long before the birthday dinner, but for the relationship that had never existed. The parents I'd wanted, who would have been proud of my independence instead of threatened by it. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed in my own room to sunlight I didn't have to feel guilty about enjoying. I made coffee in my kitchen, sat at my small dining table, and opened my laptop to check emails. One stood out. The sender's name made me pause. Janet Morrison. I almost deleted it unread. Almost. But curiosity won. "Sarah, I know you won't respond to this. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But I need you to know something. Your father is gone. Not dead. Just gone. He left me 3 weeks after we moved to Florida. Said he couldn't stand looking at me anymore, knowing what we'd done. The condo is too expensive for me alone. The Social Security isn't enough. I don't know what to do. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what it feels like to be abandoned by someone who's supposed to love you. What it feels like to realize you were only valued for what you could provide. I'm sorry. Not because I need something from you, but because it's true. We raised you to be generous and kind and helpful, then punished you for being exactly what we'd made you. We taught you that love meant giving until it hurt, then threw you away when we thought the well had run dry. Your father always said you'd regret cutting us off. He was wrong. The only regret is mine. Mom. I sat staring at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond to offer. What forgiveness money? A second chance. But I'd learned the difference between love and manipulation, between family and financial entanglement. Instead, I closed the laptop and got ready for my day. I had a life to live, one I'd paid for in more than just money. One I'd bought with the hardest currency of all, the courage to believe I deserved better. That evening, I met Grace for dinner to celebrate the final paperwork being filed. Over pasta and good wine, not the cheap stuff Emma and I had shared, she raised her glass. To new beginnings, she said. To learning when to stop paying, I countered. We clinked glasses and I felt it again, that lightness, that freedom. Somewhere in Florida, my mother was learning what it felt like to count pennies and sweat over bills. Somewhere else, my father was probably finding a new source of supply, someone else's daughter to drain dry. But here in Hartford, in my own space, I was learning something else entirely: how to be my own family, how to provide for myself first, how to give from surplus, not from survival. The waiter brought our dessert, a small chocolate cake enough for two. As I took the first bite, I thought about that other cake, the one I'd thrown away 6 months ago. The one with the smudged frosting and the missing letter. This one was perfect. Ordered by me, paid for by me with money I'd earned and kept. No one could take it away. No one could tell me I didn't deserve it. Happy 31st birthday to me. Sometimes the most profound act of self-love is recognizing when the people who gave you life are stealing it from you piece by piece. Blood makes you related. It doesn't make you family. Family is built on mutual respect, genuine care, and love that doesn't come with a price tag. Have you ever had to choose between your own well-being and family expectations? When did you realize that no is a complete sentence? Even especially to the people who raised you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop saving everyone else. And remember, you are not responsible for the financial consequences of other people's choices, even if those people are your parents. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Stay strong. Your worth isn't measured in utilities paid or mortgages covered. It's measured in the courage it takes to choose yourself even when everyone says you're wrong for doing so.